Bereft of a plan of action for my return to Newcastle, I just headed back to work, not fully sure what to expect. The mood at the New Hampshire Plumbers Union headquarters was overall sullen and hopeless. All around me I heard hushed whispers insinuating Erwin's betrayal, coupled with sustained glares from the resident pencil pushers. I attempted to go about my day stone-faced and directionless until I found a note in my locker simply reading, "The shop steward's office, during lunch." I carried on as before until then. Erwin's office remained as it was before. Some of the guys had apparently been defending it from the higher-ups who'd been trying to clean it out. About a dozen men stood along the walls as a shorter young man with a chin-strap beard paced around the room. Erwin's chair remained empty. "And the survivor from the sewers arrives at last," the man said with extended arms as I entered, before extending one to me. "It's Tanner, by the way." "Kilpatrick," I replied, shaking his hand. Tanner nodded and turned to address the group again. "I'd like to start us off by mentioning that this is actually the largest gathering of the Brotherhood of the Waterhorse in several decades. As I told you earlier, our shop steward launched an expedition into the Newcastle sewer system with 5 other plumbers. Our latest arrival is the only one to have made it out. Schultz also escaped," I corrected. Tanner nodded, "but he chose to cut and run, and now the police have him." "Then I reiterate, Jeremy Kilpatrick is the sole survivor. While this dealt a significant blow to the Brotherhood, we now have a better grasp of the scope of the Cult of the Rolling Scarab's operations. It must be assumed from here on that anyone outside of the Brotherhood is compromised, especially those in positions of influence. As it stands, at least when it comes to New England, that basically extends to every living soul outside of this room. With Erwin gone and Horse Lord Quimberton missing, I have taken it upon myself to propose a new expedition. Under the cover of night, we will enter Newcastle and invade the Rolling Scarab's stronghold. From there, we will capture and interrogate as many of their higher-ranking officers as we can. In order to further safeguard our position, we will need to ensure that no others leave the compound alive," Tanner said. "Obviously, I can't pull rank on anyone here, since we're all members of the First Degree. I'm open to alternative suggestions, and of course, it is your prerogative to abstain from the mission if you so choose. Okay, what I'm wondering is, what do we know about the cult so far? How are they able to take over Newcastle so quickly? Do we even know who's in charge, or at least what their organizational structure looks like?" asked a portly, hairy man seated in one of the chairs against the wall. "Very seldom, Constantine," Tanner replied soberly. "The rapidity of their success appears to have been the result of decades or more of careful planning, so far culminating in this. It's currently believed that the takeover was a response to the expedition, but again, we're not sure. The actual leader is unknown, but they appear to revere a being known as the Sorcerer. We're unsure if this Sorcerer is even a real person, since he's really only spoken of as if he's some sort of all-powerful messianic figure, and it's doubtful that he, whoever he might be, is leading things on this end. What we do know of their structure is that the whole of the cult is led by the 9 Mystics. Their actual identities are unknown thus far, but given that they're the only ones capable of magic this potent, it's reasonable for us to assume that at least one of them is currently dwelling in Newcastle. As mentioned before, his capture will be our top priority." "But how will we even get to him?" asked a tall, thin man with a bit of a baby face. "The town is crawling with shit golems. It's doubtful we'll even make it to the stronghold." "Fair enough, Casey," Tanner began, before grinning. "But what is it that you thought the water tanks were for?" Without much further discussion, we carried on with our days, reconvening at the NHPU headquarters at around midnight. Everyone I saw in the shop steward's office, to a man, had been in attendance. Well, with the notable exception of Tanner. "Hey, Kilpatrick, right?" a man I recall speaking the other day asked me as I arrived. "Name's Constantine." "Yeah, you were the one who asked for more info about the cult," I began. "You can call me Jeremy, though." Cool, Constantine said as he looked down and scratched his rather thick black beard. "So you've actually seen these shit golems in action, huh?" "Leave him be, Constantine," said a tall, slender, though slightly hunched over man with an angular face. "He's been through enough as it is, I'm sure." "Fuck off, Andrew," Constantine exclaimed. "I just wanted to get a bit of a better idea of what we're up against." "It's a fairly reasonable request," I interjected. "What would you like to know about the shit golems?" This prompt swiftly caught the attention of the others. "How are they made?" Constantine asked with rapt curiosity. "And how do you kill them? Again, if you feel comfortable answering the question, you know what I mean?" Andrew added, trailing off toward the end. "I don't know a lot of the specifics," I began. "But what I do know is that they start out as ordinary people, then transform after ingesting these small wooden statues. The trick is to aim for the creature's throat with the water pressure in order to dislodge the statues from the rest of their bodies. That's how you kill them." "Very concise, Jeremy," said Tanner as he walked briskly to the rest of the group. "More specifically, the small idols appear to possess some kind of magical force that animates any fecal material attached to it. For instance, if you sever one of their limbs, that limb will revert to an inert pile of shit. However, if the limb somehow becomes reconnected to the rest of the creature, it'll become animated once more. That's why the idols must not only be dislodged entirely, but also recovered and destroyed. Unfortunately, that's about all we know, which is why the capture of the Mystic is absolutely crucial. Since each van fits only 6, we'll be taking 2. Jeremy and I will be traveling separately, since he and I are the only ones here to have ever actually faced shit golems up close. Constantine, Andrew, Casey, Gil, and Frank will be with Jeremy. The rest will be with me. "Well, at least we'll have something of a chain of command in case you fall," said the middle-aged, goateed man earlier identified as Gil. Tanner met this with a wry grin. "You won't be saying that once you see what I can do with a hose," he said before sauntering to one of the vans with his entourage in tow. "I'll drive," the older, white-haired man, earlier identified as Frank, said as we made our way to ours. The ride itself was fairly short. Frank mostly kept his attention to the road while Constantine conversed with Casey and Gil. Well, when I say conversed, I meant talked their ears off eagerly about the mission while Gil kind of nodded along agreeably and Casey just sort of rolled his eyes. Andrew sat quietly, looking a bit nervous. My contributions were limited mostly to regaling the others of my side of what happened in the sewers that day, and giving rudimentary instructions on how to properly use and accoutre the water tanks, which I wound up needing to repeat to Constantine, Gil, and Casey upon my arrival. Frank and Andrew actually surprised me with their competence, given their age and apprehension respectively. We arrived in advance of Tanner and his crew by a couple of minutes. "Good to see all the men kitted out before we made it," Tanner said as he bounded eagerly out of the van, being the first among his colleagues to arm himself. Fully equipped, we made our way through town in search of the cult's headquarters. At first, this mostly consisted of everyone searching through the houses in 6 teams of 2. Tanner's crew paired up amongst themselves, Constantine joined with Andrew and Gil with Frank, Casey with, I guess, one of Tanner's men, leaving Tanner and I. For our part, the following couple of hours lent us nothing fruitful, unless you count the interesting discovery that the bathrooms of every house were left in a state of utter disarray, with the toilets actually overflowing with mounds of, well, I think you might know well enough by this point. Finally, Casey bounded out of the house opposite to the one hosting us. "I found a flyer in there," he said as he pointed erratically at the building he had just exited. "It says they hold meetings at the town hall." Before anyone could react, a shit golem the size of 3 men descended upon him, presumably from a rooftop, and promptly devoured him. Damn it, Casey, Tanner said under his breath. I probably said it about a dozen fucking times on the way. We need to stay quiet. Fuck! He then leapt from the floor and charged outside. As the shit golem went to take a swing at him, Tanner sent a jet of pressurized water in the direction of the fist, melting most of its arm clean off. He then leapt to the sidewalk when the creature attempted to drive him into the pavement with his other fist. Tanner then ran up the creature's arm and fired upon the throat when reaching the shoulder. The creature melted to the ground, allowing Tanner to descend gracefully, before he reached the wood carving and promptly broke it beneath his heel. The rest of us came out after the coast seemed clear enough. You heard what Casey said, Tanner said flatly. From here, we make our way to the town hall. We managed to make it about a couple of blocks before hearing a sound like several pairs of rain boots trudging through a bog. Before we had even seen them, the shit golems were upon us, immediately dispatching Gil and another from Tanner's crew. Form a circle, Tanner shouted to the rest of us. Leave no man's back exposed. We promptly did as we were told, immediately setting ourselves to the task of hosing these motherfuckers down. Unfortunately, Tanner and I appeared to be carrying the effort, and even then I only stacked up due to having had the misfortune of dealing with these things before. Frank and Andrew seemed to be the better among the rest, though all of Tanner's men seemed to possess a little more skill than Constantine, who appeared to just be firing wildly at anything that got a bit too close to him. After the coast had been made clear, we went to work destroying the small statues for good measure, and kept moving. After what felt like many tense, long hours, we finally made it to the town hall. It was painted white in stark contrast to the surrounding buildings. Another stark contrast being the maroon banners, with what looked like a brown beetle at the center of each adorning each of its columns. The sigil of the rolling scarab. Another, worth mentioning, is the large throng of shit golems that had surrounded the perimeter.